The Periscope Stalker. About a year ago, I was dating a girl who attended the University of Georgia in Athens, GA. We had been dating for almost 2 years at the time, and I'd grown close to her. I knew her family well. Her father had passed away in his 50s from prostate cancer, but he had been an engineer with a decent life insurance policy, so his family was comfortable. My girlfriend Amy had 2 sisters, Faye and Elizabeth. While Amy had moved out when she went to college, her mother and her 2 sisters still lived in a suburb near Little Five Points in East Atlanta. They were only a 20-minute walk from Vortex, a really good burger place in the area. It was a nice neighborhood, and there was relatively low crime. There was some government housing a few miles away, but their neighborhood was well maintained, and everyone knew each other, at least in that part of the neighborhood. Faye was 18 years old, and her sister Elizabeth was 13. I got along with them well whenever I was over. Sometimes we'd head out to the farmer's market, grab a bunch of random foods, and then try to put together a palatable meal from whatever we had grabbed. It was fun. Amy's mom was an ER nurse at Grady, and she worked odd hours. Unfortunately, due to the work, she was often unavailable by phone if Amy or one of her sisters needed to reach out for any reason. One night, I get a panic call from Amy. Elizabeth had called her sister crying and asked me and her to drive from Athens up to Atlanta. She was almost hysterical, and Amy said it was hard to understand her words over her sobbing. The following was told to me by Elizabeth, Amy, and her mother, so it may not be entirely accurate. Elizabeth had been using Periscope, a webcam app, on her phone for a few months. It allows you to broadcast a video stream where it will be displayed on a map so people around the world can view your stream. It does have a security setting that obscures your location so no one knows exactly where you are. Elizabeth had built up a pretty good number of followers, and she usually had around 10 to 20 people watching her at all times. She would leave the camera on while she did homework, put on her makeup, or even just watching TV. She'd probably broadcast for at least 2 to 3 hours each day, just mundane stuff more than anything else. The people viewing her could chat back. There were always some creeps on Periscope, but she could easily block them. Some people watching her never said anything. One user in particular, at Blood Eye Blues, had been watching her Periscope feed for months, but had never said anything. Within a minute of her starting a broadcast, this woman would join. She tried to get the person to say something, but they never did. Whoever they were, they had a strange graphic of a blue eye with blood dripping down from it. The user didn't have any other feeds on their account, and the user was only following her. She didn't think too much of it at first. There was a lot of weird people on Periscope, so she just figured it was someone in another country who didn't speak English who was watching her feed. One night, she was broadcasting on Periscope while she was painting her nails. It was a weekday, but there was only one person on her feed. It was the user who never said anything. She followed them back so she could see if they ever went online or broadcast themselves. She tried to get a response by talking to whoever it was, making faces, just doing random stupid things. Eventually, she went to bed and stared at Periscope for a while, waiting to see if anyone else would join her feed. She got a message. At Blood Eye Blues. Is your mom still at Grady? She panicked and ended her broadcast immediately. Her Periscope handle wasn't linked to her Facebook or anything else, and location sharing was turned off. After a minute, she got a notification from Blood Eye Blues. They had just broadcast for the first time. She opened the broadcast and just saw a live feed from the outside of her house. The camera in the feed was shaking, and the person holding it lowered the camera until she could see that he was jerking off. She panicked and tried to call her mom, then her sister Amy, my girlfriend. And that's it. That's the whole story. We talked about it and thought it must have been a really bad taste prank, even if it was. That didn't make sense. None of her friends lived within 7 or 8 miles of the house, and none of them were old enough to drive yet. Elizabeth said that it didn't look like someone young. She said that whoever it was had hairy hands that looked rough, like a mechanic or something like that. They filed a police report, but they said whoever it was had registered an account on Periscope using a VoIP account with fake information, and were using a VPS or maybe a VPN to hide their address. I didn't think you could hide your IP when using a phone, but I don't really understand that stuff. She never looked outside to see who it was. she was too scared. Old guy on Instagram. Okay, so this happened a few years ago, and I'm not much of a writer, so sorry if the story seems jumbled. This started towards the end of my 8th grade year. Basically, my friend had this guy who was following her Instagram, and he would comment on all of her posts, telling her how pretty she is. Now, that wasn't super weird, but we found it kind of creepy, because this dude is obviously in his late 50s and she was 13. And then he also started messaging her every day. Not anything overtly creepy, just mainly small talk at first. Eventually, he finds my page and starts commenting that I don't post pictures of myself online much, and basically all of it was just doodles and pictures of my dog. Now, this guy's account also mainly consisted of art, and most of it was actually pretty good, so I didn't mind him commenting on my art at first. Eventually, though, he started to message me and try to talk to me. Now, I have pretty bad anxiety, and I hate coming across as mean, so I wouldn't really respond with words unless he asked me a direct question. Mainly what I did was just send a heart or a smiley face, stupid I know. So this continues for a few weeks, and I learned that this guy just randomly blows up. I learned this because I responded to a message from him asking my age. I told him I was 13 years old, and then put my phone down because I had to do the dishes when I came back to my phone. I had like 10 messages from him asking why I wasn't responding and also telling me he was joking. I was super confused at first at what he could have sent that would have made me mad, and basically he had responded about how both me and my friend looked like we were 18. I found that kind of creepy, but I didn't want to confront him about it, so I told him it was fine and that I was just doing my chores, and the conversation moved on, and I made an excuse to stop messaging him for the day. One really creepy thing he did was when I posted a picture of my grandma's dog, which is a corgi, and put it in the caption how much I love that dog. He liked that photo. And then a day or so later, he sends me a picture of a corgi he drew for me. I thanked him for it, and then he asked me to tell him my address so he could send it to me. But I refused. He kept asking me, telling me that it was a gift, and that he wanted me to have it. I had to send a message explaining that it was a family rule, and that I was not allowed to tell him my address for him to drop it. Eventually, after a bunch of little creepy things, my friend blocked him, and so he started ranting about it to me, saying how she shouldn't be creeped out by him, and that he was basically just trying to be nice, and that if she had a problem with anything, he was saying she should have let him know. He basically continued on like that for the next few days, and then he pointed out how he was following her backup account, and how he was going to start talking to her on that one. So I basically told my friend about all of this, and she blocked him on her backup. I stopped responding to him as well and blocked him. So creep on Instagram. Let's not meet. Let me taste you. I should make it clear from the beginning, I have not always had the best taste in men. We'll get out of the way now. After a split from my husband and being hit on by the worst of the worst, my friends and I thought it would be funny for me to sign up for Tinder as a social experiment of sorts. At least then I can control the men who talk to me, as well as provide my friends with hilarious screenshots. I will add, Tinder isn't all bad, as I met my fiance on the app. You win some, you lose some. I met a man named Jason who seemed intelligent, witty, and had a successful career. After talking for a while, I agreed to meet up with him for coffee. I hated coffee. He was attractive and seemed very attentive. It was a nice date, and we made plans to meet up again for sushi. The next week we met for sushi, and after what I thought was a good date, he suggested we went back to his apartment to watch some documentaries. I'm a sucker for documentaries, and he did not seem like a serial killer, so I agreed. As we sat on his couch, he turned on an obscure documentary about some musician from the 50s, which I was fine with, but I noticed he kept staring at me. Now, attention can be flattering, or it can be downright creepy. Unfortunately, his attentiveness fell under the latter category. After a few minutes of actively ignoring his staring, he, completely out of nowhere, said, "Can I taste you?" I've always been a fan of serial killer documentaries, and I was pretty sure this may have been one of Dahmer's pickup lines, so I politely declined and note the fuck out of there. At the time, I was creeped out, but chalked it up to a good failed Tinder date story. Here's where things got really weird. He soon asked me out on another date, and although my mind wanted to scream, I'd rather be waterboarded than spend more time with him, I politely explained that due to going through a divorce, it was not a good timing, and I wasn't truly ready to date anyone. We were not friends on social media, so I didn't think it was a huge deal. A month or so later, I met the man who I would eventually become engaged to, again via Tinder, and didn't give a second thought to Jason. After a few months, there were pictures of my now fiancé and I on Facebook and Instagram. Around this time, my fiancé, who I'll call G, received a text message from a strange number claiming to be one of his female friends. It was a very strange message, as basically it had propositioned him to come for sex. He knew this was out of character for this friend, as she knew he was dating someone, so he immediately messaged the friend and asked if she had sent the message. She of course had not, and he didn't think much of it. I own my own house, so after 6 months, G had moved in with me. His friend fell upon hard times, and we welcomed her to her house to stay, until she was able to find an apartment herself. She began receiving messages on Instagram, calling her an ugly troll, a slut, and making various other demeaning remarks. Around this time, we had noticed a white car had been sitting outside of our house periodically. I live in a very rural area, and there's no parking on the street. About twice a week, we would see this white vehicle, and at first I thought it may have been my ex-husband, or someone that he knew. Again, it was not a good split. Maybe a month later, G received a message on Instagram telling him that he would never be good enough for me. He was a terrible boyfriend, and that if he hurt me, this person would hurt him. He text messaged me from work asking if I'd received any strange messages and let me know something kind of weird had happened. I let him know that I had not and asked what was going on. He sent me screenshots of the messages, and I noted that the person who had sent them was also following me on Instagram. I looked at the profile, and the only people he had followed were men who had commented on my photos or female who followed G. Once I knew about all the messages received from both G and his friend, I started to panic about the white car that would watch the house. I literally live across the street from a cornfield. There is never any reason for someone to be sitting outside of our house who we don't know. After all this came to light, I couldn't think of who might have created a fake profile to bully people who I was involved with, but I saw even the fake name was Jason. When he explained the strange text messages, and his friend divulged the messages she had received, I was still struggling to figure out who may be doing this. I went through all my social media and on Snapchat. I found that Jason was following me. I had never given him my last name, so I'm still not sure how he was able to find me. He was the only person who fit the situation, and the rude messages continued throughout the day. I knew that Jason worked as a tech developer and would have the know-how to create a fake phone number and seek out my information. On top of going through a nasty divorce, I also have 2 small children. As soon as G sent a message to Jason, conveying that the police would not be happy with someone harassing a woman with 2 small children, all the messages and communications stopped. So, creepy Jason from Tinder, let's not meet again. My Facebook stalker hacked me and stole my identity. This is a long read. It covers a span of over a year or so of my life, so bear with me. This story has so much going on that the Cliff Notes would need Cliff Notes. The most concise summary is in the title already. I am an uninteresting man in my late 20s, with a stable job and a happy family. Being so, I never even entertained the thought that I might, one day, be the target of a stalker. So here's my story as a warning to everyone. You don't have to be a typical pretty young lady to catch the eye of a stalker. I don't know if this makes sense, but I'm very habitual, yet very casual Facebook user. I don't post a lot, but I do check my newsfeed often. One Saturday night, I was doing a quick round on Facebook before I went to bed when I received a friend request. I accepted it without hesitation. Just about every friend request I receive gets accepted because I don't ever post anything very personal. As I said, I have a very casual approach to social networking. I do a quick glance on the profile that had friended me and saw that it was obviously a fake account. Not thinking much of it, I put my computer away and fell asleep. The next day, I was having lunch at a friend's house, having completely forgotten about the friend request from the night before. My phone buzzed and I saw that I got a message from a coworker of mine, Maya. Although Maya and I worked together and had a few mutual friends outside of work, we didn't communicate very much other than when it was about work. I checked it, assuming it was work-related. I guess looking back, you can say it was. To get the gist of it, the Facebook account that friended me also friended Maya, and I bombarded her with insults and accusations of being a whore, slut, and every name in the book. The person took it a bit further by messaging Maya's husband, saying that she was cheating on him with a coworker. Maya wanted to know if I knew who the person was, because I was the only other person that accepted the friend request. I explained to her how I accept every request and had no idea who it was. I then proceeded to unfriend the profile in question. Maya explained to me that she already had suspicions on who it was, but just wanted to see if I could confirm it. She believed it was Carrie. Let's rewind to a few weeks earlier. I had received a friend request from Carrie. It struck me as odd because although we worked at the same place, we had never met, never spoken, nor had we ever made eye contact or been within 20 feet of each other. We worked in different departments, but I walked past her every day because I had to walk through her department to get to our lounge. That was the further extent of our interactions. I had only learned her name from when she friended me on Facebook and I recognized her picture. I'm not sure how she found out my name. Carrie also friended my wife's profile and subsequently began to sift through hundreds and years of my wife's posts and pictures, liking and commenting on several of them. She began interacting with my posts too, as though she knew us well. At work though, I walked by like usual and still no interaction. I found it odd but didn't look far into it. So back to the present. The mysterious Facebook account continued to harass Maya until she told me that she knew it was Carrie and was going to call the police. I thought that was the end of it, but boy, was I wrong. Over several weeks, I began getting more friend requests from girls looking to hook up with me. Obviously, I knew they were all fake, and for the most part, I ignored them. I also began getting notifications from my Google and Facebook accounts about suspicious activity on my profile. Most of the time, it warned me of failed login attempts. One I specifically remember said my Facebook account was actually logged in from somewhere unusual and asked whether it was me. It wasn't me, and I should have been more concerned. But for some reason, I didn't care. I was stupid, and even after that, I didn't bother to change my password. At the time, I viewed all of these happenings as random, isolated incidences. I had no valuable stuff on my accounts and didn't have any private secretive messages. What harm could they do, right? Right? A few months passed when one day, my wife gets a message from Carrie stating that she had bought a high-end video camera and was looking to start some amateur filming. She wanted to know if we would help her by letting her film our family for a day. Remembering what Maya had said months ago, I was reluctant, but wanted to give Carrie the benefit of the doubts, so we agreed to tell her that we'd schedule a time for whenever we weren't busy and left it at that. Once again, I have yet to actually meet Carrie. More weeks pass by, and we completely forget about the scheduling the film shoots. When Carrie messages me about it, I turn her down. Then things got weird. She sent several gifs of stick figures doing sexual suggestive motions and stuff like that. I didn't respond, so she asked, "Funny, isn't it?" I immediately text my wife to log into my Facebook profile to observe the messages. Not wanting to be rude, I agreed with Carrie. as of the humor and the gifts she sent, and carried on the conversation. She proceeded to send me old photos from my abandoned MySpace account that I'd completely forgotten about. This was around the time when MySpace had been revamped and people lost a lot of cherished memories. Somehow she dug mine up and decided to share them with me. It was creepy to me. Things escalated quickly from there. She began talking about her body and how she wasn't attractive, trying to bait me into complimenting her looks. She was not beautiful, but she was an attractive person. I didn't bite though. Then she hit me with something out of the blue. She asked about my penis, calling it my cock, and suggesting that it was probably really big. I decided that was enough and stopped responding. Of course, my wife was reading the whole time, and we were texting back and forth about how funny and weird this all was. I continued to go to work and still awkwardly never actually meet her. I especially didn't want to strike up any conversations after that. Carrie messaged me one final time asking for a favor. Maya had blocked her profile, and Carrie suspected that Maya was saying bad stuff about her, so she wanted me to check her profile to confirm. I told her that I wasn't going to stalk Maya for her, and that was that. Just between us though, I did check and no, Maya couldn't care less to waste her time talking about Carrie. Around this time, my wife got a text message from an unknown number. The person knew her name, but was trying to remain anonymous and trying to flirt with her. We were with a bunch of friends at the time, and we all thought it'd be funny if we all text flirted with this person at the same time, just to annoy them. Once again, I never thought to connect any of the incidences. Carrie eventually quit work, and I never saw her again, but I continued to get suspicious activity and friend requests that I, stupidly, continued to write off. I'd all but forgotten about Carrie. Then I'd say over a year later, I get a bomb from my wife. A good friend of ours texted her that I was sending her very inappropriate messages on Facebook. I've been running busy errands all day and hadn't really checked my Facebook at the time. I found that my password had been changed, and when I finally logged back in, all of my messages had been cleared. I had no idea the extent of what happened until I started hearing from more people that I was being very suggestive and nasty to them. The things were, these weren't random women on my friends list that were targeted. These were women that were close to me, good friend, my wife's sisters, my friends' wives. These messages weren't holding back either. They went all out in graphic detail about how I and what I wanted to do to them. I felt completely violated and humiliated. I couldn't imagine how the woman felt. My wife and I were all really close to our families and friends, and every week or so, all our friends would get together and drink, barbecue, watch movies, and sports to hang out. We'd have several families over and never had a problem. All of them said they understood what happened, and that they know it wasn't me, deep inside though. I could see that they felt that it possibly, potentially, probably was me. Over time, more and more of them stopped coming over to the point where the home started to feel completely empty. I confided in my wife on how I felt that they thought it was me, and she rebuffed that, said that I was just being paranoid about it. She argued that our friends were just busy with their lives, that they'd eventually come over when they were free again. I then learned that someone had created a Facebook account using my name and picture, and I continued harassing the same woman. One of them posted a picture of the conversation with me on Facebook. She commented that it could really be me because that mysterious person had used some words that I would typically use. She also stated that the person knew my friends and family extensively. My heart instantly dropped and shattered reading that. I quit checking my Facebook for the longest time, and I fell into a mild depression. I felt miserable. I told my wife I wanted to disappear and strongly considered quitting my job of 7 years and moving away to start anew. I now know that I was being quite irrational, and thankfully my wife stayed strong for me through it all. I felt like I needed to defend my honor and started gathering alibis of times, people, and places I was around during the time of many of those messages. My wife brutally told me that she couldn't believe I was weak enough to let a no-life dumbass on Facebook put me down and make me feel that way, which is true. I am and always have been a very, very mentally strong person. I always look for the best in a bad situation, but for some reason this affected me differently. I can't explain why, but I felt extreme shame and guilt for something I didn't even do. without my wife's support knocking me back to reality. I don't know what would have happened. We advised our friends to just ignore the person. Eventually, everything stopped. From time to time, I still get a random friend request, but I don't accept them anymore. I don't have any proof that this was all the work of Carrie. It just all happened during a time when she injected herself into my life and eventually stopped after she left it. My friends had started coming over again, but it hasn't felt the same ever since then. I don't know if it's dumb or it was just in my head. My wife and I came to the conclusion that Carrie reveled in the misery of others. After tormenting Maya, she moved on and targeted me, trying to ruin my marriage and distance me from my friends for no other reason than the fact that she enjoyed doing so. I'm sure she hasn't stopped and left me alone only because she found a new victim to harass. Carrie, I never met you. Let's not meet.